It's no rocket science telling that the parents' own upbringing in a foreign culture and the upbringing of their children in a different culture here in America is part of the problem. But equally important is the knowledge of how a child's brain works. The lack of parents' understanding of how a child's brain works also adds up to the situations of conflict with their children, where children throw tantrums and things go out of control very easily. But if we know how a child's brain works, it can help minimize these situations and conflicts. Knowing that children, when growing up, have two basic needs: the need of privacy, just like we have as adults. Children also growing up, especially, they also have a need for privacy, and they also have a need for independence in making small decisions. Now, these two needs generally run counter to or opposite to the Desi parents' need of asserting their authority. So when children assert their independence in small decision making, and the parents counter with their asserting their authority, that usually ends up in flaring up situations and children throwing tantrums. But it doesn't have to be always like that. We can follow certain do's and don'ts, and once we have these certain do's and don'ts, it can minimize all of these situations of conflict. Now remember that you are to be a role model for your children. Parents are there to be a role model. They're not there to defeat their children. They're there to become a role model for their children. And when you are a role model, you don't demand respect. Role models demonstrate respect. So when you're demanding respect from your child, it means you're not a role model. When you display anger or frustration and focus your comments on the child's personality instead of child's behavior, for example, saying things like, "You're so rude," "You're so disobedient," or "You're so angry," you are attacking the person. You're attacking the personality, not the behavior that you want to rectify. So instead of saying that you're rude, you're bad, or you're disrespectful, if you just rephrase how you're saying it and say it to the behavior, like saying, any parent would be hurt when someone uses words like you used for me, and I felt hurt with your words. Wouldn't you feel hurt when you were in my place? When you explain things like that towards a behavior and not the person, it won't look like an attack on the person. But this is a very tricky point. When you're explaining things like that, they may go into the realm of lecturing. So my advice is brevity. Be brief, and the rule of thumb is use between 3 and 5 sentences to explain what you want to explain in terms of explaining their behavior. Now, when things flare up, emotions go out of control, and parents end up into calling names or being sarcastic or ridiculing their children. This is a no-go area. Sarcasm or ridicule is a killer of trust. If you want to maintain trust with your children, you won't pass any kind of a sarcastic remark. So avoid sarcasm or ridicule. In fact, it is recommended that just ignore those minor expressions of defiance, like rolling eyes or mumblings under the lip, just ignore it. Remember that you are there to turn their behaviors around. You are not there to feel offended every moment and try to defeat your child. You're not there to defeat your child. Your child must feel secure that if they fail, if they fall, you will be there to pick them up. You will be there to save them. You will be there to bring them back on track. They must feel secure even in terms of failing. So if they fail in school, or if they're failing with their friends, or if they're failing someplace, or if they're at a game, you must accept them because they are your children, whichever way they are. And in terms of, of our parents have, end up, setting rules everywhere, rules for eating, rules for sleeping, rules for dress up, rules for everything. Make only a few rules, very few rules. All human beings growing up know what's right and wrong. It's another thing, that they don't follow, but they know that what is wrong, what is right. So when you make only a few rules, there will be very few instances of violating those rules. But once you make those very few rules, make sure you and your spouse both are assertive about implementing those rules. And if you remember earlier, I talked about being a role model. There is nothing wrong in saying sorry to your child, but never ever demand sorry from your child. If you demand apologies, demand sorries, that is not the way. Instead, if they offer you a sorry, if they come back and show some kind of a remorse, ask them to go and do an act of kindness to somebody. Do an act of benevolence or volunteer to somebody else. That will be their restitution. That will be their repair. That will be their sorry for you. Don't ask, because self-esteem, sorry, kills self-esteem, and you don't want your child to lose their self-esteem in front of you. So that is that's the most important part in terms of character building. But if somehow things do get out of control, as a final resort, it's okay to sit together with your child, but in the presence of somebody else, in the presence of someone your child trusts, because there is a breach of trust at this moment. You cannot ask your child to sit with you and listen to the same thing they're expecting from you. Sit with your child in the presence of a third person, somebody they trust. And at that point, that's the time to say sorry to them. That's the time you tell what you will change in your behavior towards them, and don't ask and don't ask anything in return. Tell them what you will change. Tell them the changes in your behavior. They will know automatically how to mimic your offer. That's it for now.